The News at Noon with John Daw, Bob McAdory, and Lisa Whitmore.
McCain, a man of great misery and suffering, has seemingly passed from this plane. While it is not our intent to disparage the dead, he serves a fine lens by which we can understand many grave developments of the past decade. Extraordinarily, John McCain was at the forefront of the war in Libya, the war in Syria, and even the war in Ukraine. Three very important and connected events that represent an unmeasurable amount of misery. Let us begin with his support of the mercenaries used in the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi.
Arizona Senator John McCain is in Libya to meet with rebel forces.
They're my heroes.
The senator arrived in the rebel stronghold of Benghazi Friday.
Came here to get an on-the-ground assessment of the situation. Yes, we're meeting with a council, we're meeting with the military, we're meeting with lots of people.
Connor Powell is streaming live from Benghazi. Connor?
Well, Greg, for weeks now, the U.S. Public and American officials have been trying to figure out who exactly are these Libyan rebels, and Senator John McCain has arrived here in Benghazi today to try to help answer that question. He's meeting with members of the military and political leadership of the opposition council here in Benghazi all day today. This morning, he started out by taking a tour of the downtown area, met with some officials from the Libyan opposition, also saw some of the memorials to the Libyan fighters who have been killed here in recent weeks. Now, Senator McCain called these Libyan fighters his heroes, and he said that he's here primarily to try to figure out who they are and also to help get a gauge of the situation here on the ground. Now, we understand he's meeting today with the members of the council. He'll have a press conference later today to talk a little bit about what he's seen and heard during his day. It's only expected to be here for a day or so, but since the very beginning of this conflict started in February, Senator McCain has been a very prominent and vocal supporter of U.S. military intervention here in Libya, even going so far as saying that he wants the U.S. to help arm these Libyan fighters. That's a position that the White House and the administration has not yet taken. But Senator McCain has been pushing the U.S. government and President Obama to do more to help these fighters. We suspect that he will continue to push that later today.
Yesterday, I went to the courthouse in Benghazi to see where the February 17th revolution began. 9 months later, Gaddafi is dead and an al-Qaeda flag flies over the courthouse.
How many American politicians went to war-torn Libya? Why does a U.S. senator from Arizona care about rebels in Libya? Did he care so much about their democratic aspirations? Did they even have democratic aspirations? Look at the awful mess the once jewel of Africa has now become. Open slave markets? Al-Qaeda? If it wasn't for democracy, what was it for? Next, McCain pops up meeting with the rebels in Syria, the same rebels who would later split off largely into ISIS and al-Nusra aka HTS. In fact, one of the men he meets with appears to be ISIS founder Abu Baghdadi. Again, he is a strong advocate of military intervention to save the day.
He secretly crossed the border into the war zone yesterday to meet with rebels trying to overthrow the Assad regime and build support for arming those fighters. ABC's John Carl has the details from Washington. John, this comes as Europe is lining up behind McCain's campaign for more military aid to the rebels.
That's right, George. The European Union has now lifted its arms embargo on Syria. That is the first step towards getting heavy European weapons to the Syrian rebels. McCain crossed over that border with Turkey in great secrecy. He met directly with the top Syrian rebels to make the point that they deserve all the support the United States can give. And George, this was with such secrecy that not even his daughter knew that he was going there until she heard about it on Twitter.
Yeah, she learned about it from Twitter. But meanwhile, the Obama administration is still not ready to approve direct military aid arming the rebels.
They aren't. They are certainly considering that. That is one of the top options for escalating support. And George, there's a lot of U.S. aid going to the rebels. It's just not weapons at this point.
Try as he may, John McCain can't shake falsehoods about ties to ISIS. Senator John McCain was one of the earliest advocates of American military action against the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. So it has been vexing for Mr. McCain to be battling persistent and false internet rumors that he not only helped invent the group but also knows its leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the self-proclaimed caliph of the Muslim world and America's latest public enemy number one. The rumors are based partly on images of a Syrian fighter who resembles Mr. Baghdadi, seen in photographs with Mr. McCain, some originally posted on Twitter by the senator during his visit in May 2013 to northern Syria. He met members of the Free Syrian Army, an insurgent group that opposes ISIS and that President Obama, in a speech Wednesday on his new strategy for battling ISIS, has vowed to strengthen. Nurtured by conspiracy blog posts, social media, and photo-altering tricks, the false rumors of Mr. McCain's relationship with ISIS have taken on a life of their own. One doctored photo shows the senator, an Arizona Republican, pinning a medal on Mr. Baghdadi's chest.
This is Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, head of the Islamic militant group ISIS, who now rivals Ayman al-Zawahiri of al-Qaeda as the most infamous jihadi leader in the world. Background on the man who's drawn the United States back into Iraq, now on the New York Times Minute. In early July, al-Baghdadi delivered a sermon in Mosul, Iraq. It was a bold public appearance following his group's recent territorial gains. But he was not always a militant. He is said to have received a doctorate in Islamic studies from a university in Baghdad in the 1990s. It was shortly after the U.S. invasion of Iraq that Mr. al-Baghdadi became a member of al-Qaeda. In 2004, U.S.-led coalition forces detained him, but considered him a low enough threat to eventually release him. Today, Mr. al-Baghdadi's goal is to create a Sunni Islamic state stretching across Syria, Iraq, and perhaps further. He used the chaos of the Syrian civil war to seed his insurgency and gain strength. Now, after moving down the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, town by town, ISIS controls large areas of both Iraq and Syria, with frequent attacks aimed at gaining more land. American officials say Mr. al-Baghdadi's ISIS rivals Mr. al-Zawahiri's al-Qaeda in its appeal to jihadis around the world. ISIS has a robust social media presence, and with its recent successes, Mr. al-Baghdadi has demanded that all jihadi groups, including al-Qaeda, swear allegiance to him.
ولو علمتم ما في الجهاد من الأجر والكرامة والرفعة والعزة في الدنيا والآخرة لما قعد أو تخلف منكم أحد عن الجهاد.
Hillary Clinton has described already the meeting in the White House over 2 years ago. Everyone in the National Security Team recommended arming ISIS, and the president by himself turned it down. Just like by himself, he decided not to strike Syria after he said that they'd crossed the red line.
Let me ask you about what your colleague Rand Paul said about it this morning. He said it's a mistake to arm them. Most of the arms that we've given the so-called moderate rebels have wound up in the hands of ISIS because ISIS simply takes it from them, or it is given to them, and we mistakenly actually end up giving it to some radicals. How look, things are very...
Has Rand Paul ever been to Syria? Has he ever met with ISIS? Has he ever met with any of these people? No. We're going to have a fight because it's patently false. This is the same Rand Paul that said we didn't want to have anything to do with anything to do in the Middle East, by the way. I don't want to get in a fight with him at all. Yeah. But it's not true. I know these people. I'm in contact with them all the time.
So, Congressman Adam Kinzinger, a friend of yours, also a military veteran, a Republican, he said on Twitter when he heard about your visit, quote, fact-finding mission, fact, 50,000 plus dead children in Syria. Tulsi Gabbard, I hope you didn't meet with their butcher, Assad. Now, Assad has used chemical weapons on his own people. You said it's going to be up to the Syrian people, but there really aren't free and fair elections in Syria.
I'll tell you what I heard from the Syrian people that I met with, Jake, walking down the streets in Aleppo, in Damascus, hearing from them. They expressed happiness and joy at seeing an American walking through their streets, but they expressed a question. They said, why is it that the United States, its allies and other countries are providing support, are providing arms to terrorist groups like al-Nusra, al-Qaeda, Ahrar al-Sham, ISIS, who are on the ground there raping, kidnapping, torturing, and killing the Syrian people, children, men, women, people of all ages. They asked me, why is the United States and its allies supporting these terrorist groups who are destroying Syria, when it was al-Qaeda who attacked the United States on 9/11, not Syria. I didn't have an answer for them.
Obviously, the United States government denies providing any sort of help to the terrorist groups that you're talking about. They say they provide help for the rebel groups. Tell us more about...
The reality is, Jake, the reality is, and I'm glad you brought up that point, because this is an often talked about thing by people like Adam Kinzinger and others saying, well, we've got to support the moderate rebels. Every place that I went, every person that I spoke to, I asked this question to them. And without hesitation, they said, there are no moderate rebels. Who are these moderate rebels that people keep speaking of? Regardless of the name of these groups, the strongest fighting force on the ground in Syria is al-Nusra or al-Qaeda and ISIS. That is a fact. There's a number of different other groups. All of them essentially are fighting alongside, with, or under the command of the strongest group on the ground that's trying to overthrow Assad. The Syrian people recognize, and they know, that if President Assad is overthrown, then al-Qaeda or a group like al-Qaeda that has been killing Christians, killing people simply because of their religion or because they won't support their terror activities, they will take charge of all of Syria. This is the reality that the people of Syria are facing on the ground, and why they are pleading with us here in the United States to stop supporting these terrorist groups. Let the Syrian people themselves determine their future, not the United States, not some foreign country.
And we've been showing video of your trip, from your trip. In the minute we have left, tell us the most striking image you have from your visit to this war-torn region.
Yeah, Jake, you know, the destruction is very real, both on the physical buildings and the things that people have gone through, looking into their eyes and hearing firsthand from a girl who is now 19, but who, when she was 14 years old, these rebels that people say we should continue supporting, they came and kidnapped her. They raped her multiple times. They killed her father in cold blood right in front of her and her little brother. All she is asking for, literally, is for the United States to stop supporting these so-called rebel groups, stop supporting these terrorists, so that the Syrian people can begin to try to get back to some semblance of normalcy.
The Syrian war has lasted years and nearly destroyed an entire civilization. The amount of suffering unleashed on these people is unfathomable. Is this really for democracy? McCain cares so much about the Syrian people? How can we reconcile pouring gasoline on a raging fire? If the link to Baghdadi is strange, how about the final link in this presentation, neo-Nazis in Ukraine? McCain made a stop there too to meet with the, once again, Democratic rebels. Funny how these Democratic rebels keep seeming to take power not with democracy but with force.
2 U.S. senators made an appearance in Kiev this weekend to rally tens of thousands of protesters who want to see Ukraine sign a trade deal with the European Union.
The free world is with you. America is with you. I am with you. Вільний світ з вами. Америка з вами. І я з вами. This is about the future you want for your country. This is about the future you deserve.
Як зараз каже кого?
Ви відстоюєте, ви боретеся.
Шановні друзі!
In 2013, Ukrainians rose up against the authoritarian pro-Russian government. Protesters gathered at the Maidan Square in Kiev and deadly clashes broke out. By February 2014, the revolution was successful. A month later, Russian-backed separatists ignited a war in the east. Many of the protesters who fought on the Maidan formed armed militias to battle the separatists. One of the most effective was a small far-right group, the Azov Battalion.
Який приймав участь у прямих бойових зіткненнях з ворогом. Потім це став полк. Полк, який отримав свою техніку, артилерію і так далі. І згодом це вже переросло в такий рух в Україні. Зараз це вже політична партія.
For Ukrainian nationalists, January 1st is one of the most important days in their calendar. It marks the birth of Stepan Bandera, the leader of the Ukrainian partisan forces during the Second World War. The rally was organized by the far-right Svoboda Party. Protesters marched amidst a river of torches and signs saying, "Ukraine above all else." But for many in Ukraine and abroad, Bandera's legacy is controversial. His group, the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, sided with Nazi German forces before breaking with them later in the war. Western historians also say that his followers carried out massacres of Polish and Jewish civilians. But for many of his supporters, he is a symbol of Ukraine's struggle for independence.
This year is the 105th anniversary of his birthday. Every year since 2006, Svoboda marches on the 1st of January in memory of him and to spread his ideas. The ideas are very simple: to leave it an independent country where Ukrainians will be the owners of their motherland.
The Svoboda Party itself is also highly controversial. It has played a major role in the country's pro-European, anti-government protests, now more than a month old. Ukraine is a deeply divided country, however, and many in its east and south consider the party to be extremist. Many observers say that rallies like today's Torchlight March only add to this division.
Вони свій шлях визначили. Вони хочуть з Московією, які проблеми, а ми хочемо з Україною, бо це наша земля. Це земля Степана Бандери, це земля упівців, це земля наших.
In Ukraine, a far-right militia known as the Azov Battalion is holding summer camps for kids.
Тут не як в других лагерях. Тобто ми пропагандуємо здоровий образ життя, заняття спортом. У нас майже всі спортсмени. Тобто дітей, яких в табори відправляють там, де їх просто веселять, то в нас вже трошки інше направлення.
This is the future of Ukraine, of our nation. So we teaching children to love Ukraine.
Слава Україні! Слава нації! Україно! Україно! Помолися!
Joining me now, Senator John McCain, who I know, Senator, you have just addressed the crowd of protesters there yourself in Kiev. What is it you're trying to do here?
Hopefully what we're trying to do is bring about a peaceful transition here that would stop the violence, would give the Ukrainian people what they unfortunately have not, with different revolutions that have taken place, a real legitimate society. This is a grassroots revolution here. It's been peaceful except for when the government tried to crack down on them, and the government hasn't done that since. But praising their ability and their desire to demonstrate peacefully for change that I think they deserve. Look, these people love the United States of America. They love freedom. And I don't think you could view this as anything but our traditional support for people who want a free and democratic society.
McCain argues that one cannot view his involvement in Ukraine as anything but the pursuit of freedom and democracy. But the government of Yanukovych was elected. His term wasn't up yet. Why couldn't they have waited to simply vote him out? Instead, a violent overthrow of the legitimate government of Yanukovych took place. Can one support democracy by overthrowing elected officials? Did any of the democratic hopefuls take power by structural means? Who the hell are these ethno-nationalists? Oh, they hate Muscovy, aka ethnic Russians? Oh, ethnic Russians make up the entire eastern half of Ukraine? Amongst the PR prepared to excuse the imperial play, one may find the real intentions, but only if one is careful to listen. Indeed, we must ask, why does McCain pop up right before one of these campaigns? Libya is a complete disaster. Syria is a genuine nightmare. Ukraine turned into the ugliest brother versus brother quagmire. Were any of these people better off for his involvement? But he said he cared for them. Well, then he was either a terrible, terrible ally, or caring for them was not what brought this dealer of misery to their doorsteps.
When I search John McCain on YouTube, the biggest thing that comes up is you singing Bomb, 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 Bomb Iran. 744,000 hits, in case you haven't checked it recently. Are you proud or embarrassed of that?
I'm proud. Look.
Bomb Iran, you know, bomb, 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 bomb. Anyway.